On this podcast, we talk about different areas of business and all things marketing. My name is Dave Doyle.
And I'm Dave Alton, and this is Social Antics, another marketing podcast. Hey folks, and welcome to Social Antics, another marketing podcast. Usually you do the introduction, but we've no producer this week because ours fucked off to New York for a couple of days.
Back to the old days, just the two of us.
We are producerless, which means that he left us all the equipment.
And said good luck.
He left us the lights and the camera, and we fucking have to do the action ourselves, and we're in big trouble because we spent all the time trying to get this all set up.
Trying to get a light bulb on.
And we haven't a clue. We've no prep done. So apologise to our regular audience. This is going to be a bit different.
It's very different, yeah. He's off, I would say sunning himself, but I don't know what it's like off in America. We're waiting on the update. We'll do a Doyle in live into Owen.
Yeah. But it did realise us how clueless we are about all this shit without a producer, to be honest with you.
It was great when it was just us before and one mic and we didn't
One
worry about
mic and terrible audio and all the rest of it, yeah. Bring back the good old days. Retro social antics, yeah, exactly.
Back in the day.
Exactly. Now, one thing that didn't change this week is that we still have beer. You brought the beer
We needed more this week.
We needed a lot more this week. So you brought the beer this week.
I did. I brought down Killarney Brewing, Killarney beer. It's Hell's Lager. And the reason why I picked it up was it was a fairly big bottle and I thought we needed a bit extra this week than just a small can. But I kind of regretted it when I got down here because I looked at the side and I was like, oh, there's a good bit of text on the side of this one now to get through. So, but in fairness, they've done it great. So, local legend tells of a fierce battle between Thor and the devil. Thor cast down lightning bolts after lightning bolt upon the devil, who retained by tearing up the earth and hurling it back.
You've had too much to
Was
drink.
it? Or retaliated. Sorry, retaliated by tearing up the earth.
Tearing up the earth. You fucking idiot. I'll read it.
Go on, pick it up there, Dave. It's like in school, you know, you say you can pick it up now.
You can pick it up there now. Dave, where did you lose your place?
I forgot my glasses.
So Thor cast down lightning bolt after lightning bolt upon the devil, who retaliated by tearing up the earth and hurling it back. The resulting basin filled up with water and became known as the devil's punch bowl. That's a different story to what I learned in geography back in the day.
No, I don't remember that happened down in Killarney now myself.
If I put that in me leaving, sort how to failed it, I reckon.
That's like something the Healy Rays would come up with down in Kerry.
Do you think I could do library readings and stuff if the old academia doesn't work out?
I think you could, yeah. You charge for it and everything.
A lot.
So, actually, normally I ask you what's happened this week, but one thing I wanted to bring up this week was to get your thoughts on it. You're right there.
Yeah, I'm good.
To get your thoughts on it. I was driving through the lovely Cork City during the week.
Which is where we are both living.
For
our international audience.
That's it. And I was driving along and next thing, a man in a van drove up beside me and obviously in a rush to get somewhere and decided he was going to weave in and out of traffic. He was driving right up behind an LLA, basically beeping the horn to get her to move out of the way, and just drove very, very erratically out of the city in a dangerous manner.
In the words of one of my favourite people, what an inconsiderate little bollocks.
Yeah. I was thinking something similar to that myself. But it got me thinking actually, because I was driving out the road after and I was like, you know, will I or won't I? Because it was obviously a branded van he was working. I was like, will I or won't I ring the company and tell them about this person's behaviour because they were driving a branded van? And I was like, if I was in the position of the owner, would I like someone to call me? Before I tell you what happened, what would you do? Would you call?
Like, we've had this before as well, right? Whereby we've been, so without naming the company or anything like that, remember we were out in a staff night out a number of years ago and we went to a bar and the cheeky buggers got us out of the bar through nefarious means, let's say. So we were in the bar at a Christmas party. Bouncer came up, and again, well-known business that we were working with at the time, and the bouncer came up to us and said, lads, can you step outside for a minute? Now we thought, because we knew the owner, right? So we thought, oh, they're having a bit of a joke here, or you know, something's going on. And then they basically
for the rest of
said,
it, we were just after walking into the pub.
Just after walking in. Literally,
we had about that much gone out of our drinks and we got a tap on the shoulder.
The pint hadn't even gone past me lips, I'd say.
I can't remember what I ordered.
And basically we were told, no, you're not meant to be in here. No, either a case of mistaken identity, but what I actually think happened is that we went in one door, we were told we'll go around the front door, instead we did, and then they thought, obviously on the cameras that the bouncers
There's
had
not
told
many
us
places in
go,
Cork now that have 2 doors, so we're
no,
narrowing down
we're
the
narrowing it
bars.
down fairly quickly, but your man wouldn't even come
Suggestions
out
on a
and kind of
postcard.
say, because we were all sober, like it was kind of like, what is going on here? Like it made no sense. So
The younger, reckless crew of the staff had gone on somewhere else, and it was us.
they got somewhere else. All the old the directors of the company were left sitting there. But like it was absolutely like mad the way it happened. But I don't know. Like I mean, I very very rarely give out about brands like kind of online or anything like that, or I very rarely kind of go and follow because I just like have better things to be doing. But I kind of appreciate when people do it, but in a genuine manner, if that makes any sense. Like I don't like what I don't like is when you see people going to a supermarket, for example, and you've got a blend of students, younger staff, interns, experienced staff, whatever. You got a big blend in there. And someone goes in and they start acting the Billy Big Bollocks and ripping people a new one because something is a little bit or they're out or something. That's uncalled for. And people going in and being rude to bar staff or being rude to restaurant because they think there's something wrong.
Entitled.
An entitlement. That is
I've had it
unacceptable.
plenty of times when I've been on this side of the bar.
Unacceptable. I cannot. Entitlement is one of the worst things that you can possibly have in terms of customer service or customer experience. And I wouldn't tolerate it at all. What you're saying, though, is obviously someone just acting in a reckless manner where they drove out in front, could have caused an accident, and it's representing your brand, right? So, yeah, like, I mean, if I was the and this is the joys of the marketing manager.
That was
right?
it. That was my cap was on. I was like, oh, there's a brand. I know the brand. I know have a bad, that band or brand have a bad reputation in my head, So I phoned up and I asked to speak to one of the managers. I did, yeah. I was a good citizen now, looking after everyone. I went on. I felt very bad after.
Snitches get stitches.
But I done it in a very nice manner. I did not give out. I didn't curse. I didn't do anything. I rang up and said, look, I'm just letting you know, whoever's driving the van basically coming out of Cork City at the moment, have a word and tell him calm it down a bit now, or he's going to cause a crash or worse or whatever. In fairness, I was delighted because normally, yeah, grand, yeah, cheers, thanks. And this fella took my details and I said, look, I don't want any calls back. I don't want anything, just followed up for your own sake. And, we leave it at that. Like, no, I never got a phone call back. I can't even remember what the company was called.
Well, you did ask not to get a phone
call back.
Exactly,
yeah, I did fair. But
I didn't ask for a phone call back and they didn't even fucking ring me back.
Well, he told me he would. He was very adamant on the call. He was going to call me back and let me know that he was after having a chat with them. But no, in fairness, it just got me thinking, like, about the whole area of, as you even said there, people that want to, send in a complaint or, get a bad experience or whatever. And nowadays, so many customers, consumers, whatever you want to call them, are straight away going to online reviews, Google reviews, Twitter warriors, whatever it is, and just slating for no reason. Like, and it drives us mad because we're both involved in the area we're involved in terms of we're managing social media, so it comes across our door, the odd time.
It does, but there's two sides to it. So for example, right, so I'm after implementing Trustpilot in a business that I'm consulting with at the moment, right? And it's brilliant for a number of reasons, right? So one, if someone goes onto the website for the first time or if they come in store, we've got the Trustpilot branding up there. It's all legitimate. And Trustpilot is a recognized brand in and of itself. So it's not like us putting up the top 5 testimonials we've ever had and people are like, sure, of course they're good, in this particular case, it's legitimate reviews and there's hundreds of them. So we couldn't possibly fabricate them, right? That's brilliant for us because it adds an element of social proof. So other people think that it's good for, or think the shopping here is good. Therefore, I'm going to shop here as well. And again, we all know that customers will trust other customers before they actually trust other marketers. So that's the good side of it. But what's even better than that is that we as marketers can then turn around to the staff and show the staff the reviews. And when someone called someone out saying, oh, this person did a great job it's a clothing shop, so whatever, styling me, whatever the story was, that gives them a bit of a shot in the arm. And it also helps us from a kind of a consumer evaluation or a staff evaluation perspective and stuff like that. So there is a lot of value, I think, to that consumer contributing to that kind of feedback loop between the brand, the customer, and the staff. But more so now than ever, there is that sense of entitlement still where people are just fucking rude, and it drives me up the wall.
What drives me up the walls is if someone has an absolutely amazing experience inside a restaurant or whatever it is, that's brilliant. If they decide to go and put a review up, it's like, was there last Thursday, brilliant, well done, thanks. If someone has a bad experience, oh jeez, you're writing a novel by the time they get to the end of it. The passion comes into it.
I wonder what people have spend their time doing more so than anything else.
If so, my always words to someone, if you've genuine, I don't expect a review every single time someone's visited a store, but if you have an exceptional experience or something that you really need to say, put the thoughts in. Don't just think it. If you went into somewhere and said, you know what, that was absolutely fantastic, ring them up, tell them, put it online, whatever it is. Go to the effort instead of waiting for that one bad experience that you might have been served by someone that was having a shit day, or something went wrong, or someone that's been inexperienced training first day. Like for example, I was in somewhere recently. When I say recently, it was in the last 6 months, but it was kind of in the height of COVID, and I was getting a coffee somewhere, and I was chatting away to them, and they were on their own on a coffee dock, and I was like, oh, how's, I was chatting away to them. I was like, how's things? How long are you working here? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's my first day. All right. All right. And have you been really barista somewhere else or whatever? No, it's my first day. And they were thrown into a busy place to look after coffees for a day. Like, that's unacceptable. Like, and that's only opening people up for bad reviews.
No, but to be fair, there's a lot of businesses at the moment, particularly in hospitality, struggling for staff big time.
But yes, they're struggling for staff, and that's no problem. That's the reality of today. But don't put people into areas that's going to open your business up for bad publicity.
But if you're a coffee shop and you have a new barista, what choice do you have?
Someone should be standing over them, just showing them how this person was on their own.
No, but there probably was someone just dipping. I don't know what the context is, but look, in the majority of situations, someone isn't going to be just go serve coffee. Like, they're going to be some of the places of training there. Yeah, maybe, but I mean, in the majority of cases, that isn't what happens, right? So people go in, and particularly now again, because there is a shortage of staff around the place, right? So people are inexperienced. There is people short-staffed. They're under pressure. My thing with people is to just be fucking nice. Just be nice. And particularly when I remember during the last lockdown, myself and a buddy went out on, let's call it a session. Went for one or two. So went for a session. Tuesday night. Went for one or two on a Tuesday night, yeah. And what ultimately ended up happening is we ended up outside some bar and spent quite a lot of money on quite a lot of cocktails and beer.
Going on the previous story, did you end up outside the bar, or were you pushed outside the bar?
No, we ended up outside the bar. No, right, it was an outside bar. Like, yeah. And but they had a full new fleet of staff. And we threw them a few bob at the end of it. And it was like all the girls' Christmases came at once when we just gave them a little bit of a tip. But during the night, you could see people getting a little bit annoyed that they were waiting a little bit longer than they wanted. And I'm kind of going, you're in the middle of a lockdown. They're all short-staffed. They're all new staff. They're all young. Calm your tits a small bit and just fucking enjoy yourself. Do you know what I mean? So people need to be a little bit empathetic as well.
I do get that. I do get that. I'm just I'm just worried that a lot of businesses are opening themselves up in places where they don't necessarily have to, in terms of ruining good experience, and all this kind of stuff. And that's what just a lot of brands can watch out for it, and they're not at the moment. I'm going to have to stop you there, actually. The whole branding and marketing product placement cap is kicking in now, and I know the lads in Clarny Brewing won't be too happy now the label's not showing forward. It's been really annoying me there for the last few minutes.
Did you just touch
I did, yeah.
the neck of my bottle?
I did, yeah. Be alright.
There's very few people are allowed to touch the neck of my bottle, and you're not fucking one of them.
Keep it clean. You've done very well for the last couple of weeks. No dirty jokes. So actually, this time of the year now, I suppose that's why you're drinking, is it? You're celebrating.
I'm drinking every week, but we're done grading.
Yeah. Happy week. Yeah. So
happy week this week, yeah. Besides Owen not being here, which has been made this one of the most stressful weeks of my life. But yeah, other than that, we're all right.
Hopefully he comes back next week.
Yeah, hopefully he comes back next week, yeah.
So what's your celebrating, all grading, all done?
Grading done, yeah. And what's been a very, very so obviously teaching during COVID was bizarre because it was me, and this is going to sound very, very strange, but it was me, a webcam in my room with myself trying to teach. And that is ultimately what it was, right? Because you're doing the pre-recorded lectures or you're doing lectures live. But like when I was doing, again, I'm not helping myself here, but when I was doing the lectures, I did the proper green screen. So it was a proper stood up. It was a proper stood up lecture.
Oh, those little circle green screens around you, are you?
No, it was a full proper green screen.
Oh, you full notions.
Oh, the full no. Oh, absolutely in the green. So that was then turned full either black or white, and you'd have the slides in the corner.
I thought you had like the Caribbean or something behind you.
No. Way more classy than that. So, but that was to try and make, like, again, we were all locked down, right? So, one, I had more time on my hands, obviously, as everyone did. But as well as that, too, my logic was the lecture will be more authentic or real if I'm doing the lecture as I would have done the lecture if I was in the class, except probably without the moving around, but it was at least...
Or a big black or white screen behind you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but there was an element of, this is absolutely insane. Like, I'm talking to myself or I'm talking to black tiles. I'm not sure which one was kind of worse. Like,
are you there?
Yeah, is anyone there at all? Am I talking to myself?
But we've talked about it a few times. Like, even with me, I've jumped in on a couple of guest lectures for you. It is awful. And I'm so glad that things are back in classes.
But this is the trick. And this is where the problem was, is that because this year was hybrid, you had the recordings of the in-class lectures. You had some people doing full recordings, and then you had a weird opt-in, opt-out situation where people could come to class, but they could opt out if they were afraid of COVID and if they had COVID.
Or didn't want to get out of bed.
Exactly. All that kind of... Look, there was a great... Like, and obviously, look, it happens, like, but it wasn't actually the university that I'm teaching in, but it was a different university.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer. It wasn't that university, but it was a different where someone accidentally turned their camera on and they happened to be in the kitchen drinking wine during the lecture, and the lecturer had to go like, I'm glad you find this so entertaining as to crack open a bottle of wine, but can you turn off your camera, please? So very, very, very strange. And look, it's as bad for the students, right? So there are some things that can be wrapped around technology, so people can say, oh, it's more convenient. And that's fine. And there are excuses around that. And there's more flexibility, and particularly with the issues around heightened cost of living, rent expenses, all that kind of stuff. There is a logic to having some recorded materials available. However...
Big but.
There is, with the hybrid element, because you're getting a mix of people who do come to class, don't come to class, you can then have very, very low attendances.
Yeah.
If you're a lecturer who very much relies on a discussion-based class, you might have that level of discussion.
And then 2 hours becomes a very long 2 hours.
Oh, very long 2 hours. And then you also have other elements whereby people don't know whether they're going to come to class or not, and therefore they may opt out of doing a reading, for example. So therefore that kind of that engagement is a lot less. For me, the main thing was, like, because for me, lecturing is always a co-production. It's you lecturing, but then the students contribute via either engaging with you, engaging with each other, but also you get a sense of whether they're actually getting it or not. So if you're teaching, you'll have students and they're kind of subtly nodding along, and you can see the blank faces as well, that they're not getting this.
Yeah.
And when you see that, then you can revert back and you can go, okay, let's discuss this in a different way or use a different example. When it's just a screen, or even if it's a very, very small class,
that's it.
You're not getting that. So therefore, the whole education experience is entirely diminished, right? And like, education for me is never about lectures. Education, like, I mean, if you take the Cambridge or the Harvard philosophy, you read for your degree. So your lecturing will give you so much, but if you then don't listen to the designated podcast, the documentaries, do your readings and stuff like that.
We're a designated podcast now, are we?
No, because we're not.
We're
not reputable.
Was it? Not a reputable source. Yeah, stay away from this.
Exactly.
We're up there with Wikipedia, The Sun, The Mirror.
100%. Like, and even look, you know yourself, right? If you're at home and you're so how I would like bring it back to its basic 101 level, right? If you go to the cinema and you watch something, you're just watching what's on the screen, and that's it. You're not distracted. There's very limited distractions. You're very, very focused on what's going on. If you are watching a pre-recorded lecture, or you're watching a lecture which was recorded and you're watching it back afterwards, if you haven't been there, you're watching the lecture. You could be watching it on 1.5 speed or double speed. You're checking in with TikTok every now and then. You're going making a fucking cup of tea.
Pouring a
You're
bottle
being
or pouring a bottle of
pouring a
wine.
bottle of wine. Whatever the story is, right? You're being distracted, right? So therefore, you're not taking in as much. You're probably not note taking because that's not the norm. Like you would very rarely watch a YouTube video and take notes, right?
You know, that's
so it's totally different.
It happened to me. I joined in on a webinar this week, and I actually literally what you said. I was joined in. Obviously, we weren't like our faces weren't shown or anything like that. It was literally there could have been hundreds of people on it. I'm not sure how many was on it, but like that, I had it on in the house, but I was doing other stuff as well, and I was like in and out, and I wasn't listening. And exactly what you said there, and I was like, I want to be back in person at these events again.
And again, that's the difference, right? So if you have like we all listen to podcasts, right? And we have podcasts on the background. If you're listening to a podcast for entertainment purposes, but you happen to be learning a few bits and pieces there, that's fine. That's your choice in terms of how you want to consume that podcast. If you are paying anywhere between 10 grand and 16 and a half grand to do a master's, or if you're in an undergrad
to do a podcast,
it's an educational experience. So therefore there has to be the highest form of education provided, and that isn't just the material being consumed, but is how that material is consumed. So it was just a very, very strange year. Again, I'm not one of these people that would say we need to completely ditch technology in the classroom because universities need to evolve, they need to move on. We need to use the technologies that are available to heighten the learning experience, but this idea of a hybrid when you're in neither camp, that doesn't work either. So like some of my colleagues, for example, would have used the flipped classroom approach, whereby you view a pre-recorded lecture or a case study or a documentary online, then you come into the classroom and there's no lecturing in the classroom per se. It's just conversation, discussion about the particular topic or whatever the case may be. That is a good example of using your technology to actually increase the learning experience. Another example would be, and this is particularly helpful for bigger classes of 300-500 students, which you would have, and it's very, very hard to get engagement in those classes because there's 300 to 500 students there.
One or two people are not going to speak
exactly,
out in front of all
but
those.
you can have them download an app and have quizzes and stuff,
yes.
or not even quizzes, but opinion on this. So then you can say, okay,
I spotted this.
Spotted this. This is your opinion on this. Do you want to elaborate on that? So you're taking the overall opinion of the class, and then you're maybe getting someone to speak about it. So everyone's contributing, and everyone kind of sees
that's a good way
where
of
they
doing
sit.
it.
So again, like technology should be an enabler. It's not a replacement, and that's why the whole. This year in particular, like with COVID, it was understandable because it was COVID. We were locked down. We couldn't go into class. This year, there was a weird blend where it was part in, part out, and that didn't really work. And beyond that, and look, I don't begrudge people this at all, but people were locked up for 2 years.
Yeah.
Of course, I have a class at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning.
Not the hope.
If the students want to go and have a good time on a Monday after being locked away for 2 years, best of luck. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't begrudge them that for a second. Yeah. But ultimately the whole thing is that next year we need to learn from what happened during COVID, learn what worked, what didn't work, and then try and adopt and change the education experience for the better of both the academic, but obviously the student is the priority here.
Do you think going forward now over next year and next semester or whatever that many of the lectures will continue with the technology or just revert back to when like because things are going to open or have opened back up pretty much? Do you think they'll just forget the whole technology side and just go hell for leather with full in person now come September again?
I think it's like, I mean, so this is probably going to be university policies more than anything else, and I wouldn't really say they'll ditch the technology because some people were using it more than others and so on and so forth. But I mean, I think the difference is going to be, will they record or not? Okay. And I would imagine the majority will not record.
Just become compulsory to come into class.
Yeah, I think so. Because, and again, look, I think
miss out, it's your own fault kind of thing.
I think so, but I think it's like, I think there's a lesson to be learned here though for everyone, that if you, and there was one of my colleagues, I was on a call this week, and one of my colleagues made a very, very valid point whereby so students are very, very smart, right? And students will use their time, and they're very, very time poor because they're doing part-time jobs and they're working in groups for assignments, they're coming to lectures, etc. So they're very, very busy people. So students will use their own discernment in terms of what lectures they should go to and what lectures they won't. There are some lectures whereby the students will make a discernment that there is no difference to watching this lecture online versus actually going to the class in and of itself.
Like
and
going
that
back
is
to what you said, like almost the discussion side of thing. I'm not going to get that in that
discussion,
class. Maybe.
engage. And again, I don't necessarily entirely believe that, because I do believe there is a difference between you viewing someone and being in the auditorium versus you. So that, but there is a discernment that would be made there in terms of if you've got to do a part-time job to pay for your astronomical rent and pay for your astronomical fucking food prices and all the rest of it, you need to do that, like, you know. So that needs to be acknowledged in terms of the reality the students are in at the moment. That being said, I do think the majority will say that the hybrid doesn't work, and therefore the natural thing is to revert back to the way it was. I personally will probably, my preference would be to revert back to the way it was, but offer some sort of if the technology allowed it, offered some in between. So what I would like is, if you attend 70% of classes, for example, or 80% of classes, whatever the figure is, then automatically you get access to maybe the recordings as well. If you wanted to go back and look at something,
you don't
or something
get it just
like that,
not turning
you
up.
just don't get for not turning up, etc. Or if there was a student who was DSS, so disability support, they get access to everything straight away. I would be in favor of and these are being discussed in the university. These aren't just my ideas, by the way. These are things that I'm robbing from all of my colleagues, basically. But different things about clustering timetables. So in a world where students do have to engage in more, they have to be engaged in more part-time work. Instead of having a student come in, wait 5 hours between lectures, have them come in, have 2 block lectures in a row, and then they can maybe structure their part-time work around that. Like we tried with a course that I'm involved in, whereby they would have a Thursday and a Friday free. Now, the idea of having the Thursday and the Friday free wasn't necessarily that they would just get involved in group work or have it for part-time work, but also that we would put on extra labs, workshops that were outside of the curriculum, and we had those days free, and they knew that they had those days free. So it allows for a more in-depth, immersive college experience. So look, there's a lot, and again, there's a lot that we can do. I think there's a lot that we can learn as academics going into the next academic year. But also there is an element here whereby, and I'm not trying to sound crass here or kind of on a kind of a high horse, but where ultimately the academics and the educators and the students are the students. So therefore there has to be an element of, a student may, at a certain moment in time, for example, if you're in second year of a business degree, go for the low-hanging fruit, and that may be to watch something online. That's not what is best for you in terms of your overall education. So therefore there is some of this stuff that we're going to have to force on people, and that's just because, again, we're the educators and we've got the research, the data to show how people learn the best.
Going back to even my days in college, like what I learned most from now was, I learned a lot sitting in class when I was listening, but when I was out in the corridor or in the canteen or sitting down with lecturers, that's when you learn the most, because you're able to ask questions about more on the personal side of it in terms of their experience or industry experience in my case, and that's, to me, it was the valuable part over the last, and I know we've talked about this before in previous episodes, we were talking in the height of COVID and all that, but going back on it, that is what was missing the most out of the last two more years now, or whatever it is.
And it's not just the interaction between the student and the lecturer, but it's the interaction between the students and the students. So when you're leaving a class, turning around to your colleague and going, or your friend, and saying, "Did you get that?"
Yeah. And
if
they can explain it a different way. No, I didn't get it, but I thought he meant this way. That kind of thing.
That kind of thing. And the problem is that you could have someone sitting at home watching this going, "Am I completely stupid here that I didn't get this?" Whereas if you're walking out and no one got it, then, well, at the best case scenario, the lecturer will pick up that no one's getting it and corrects it. in the class in and of itself. Worst case scenario, the student picks up from talking to people that no one got it, and at least they don't feel a bit shit about themselves. Do you know what I mean? So there's a number of different things kind of going on there. And again, there's a lot of things that, like college isn't just about the education stuff, right? It's about the societies. I was never involved in any societies at all. Didn't like them. Was doing my own thing. But people get a lot of kicks out of them, and that's fine. It's learning about friends, looking after friends. It's when it's a period of your life whereby, and this is just probably that age as opposed to just being college, whereby you have to look out for people that you may not necessarily have had to look out for or be responsible before. Yeah. So your friend being very, very drunk on a night out, being the responsible one, leaving early and getting them home. That's a lesson that you learn.
I'd say you've done that plenty of times, I'd say.
Probably, I did, and people do it to me as well. So like, I mean, again, there's this absolute learning experience that goes on, and that's really, really important. That was totally absent for the last 2 years, and now it's about, for me, if we can, and it is going to be difficult, and I don't think it's going to happen next year. I think it's going to happen probably over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where we slowly bring back what was previously, but also borrow from what worked in a kind of a COVID scenario. And also technology changes, technology gets better. We should find ways whereby the education experience is heightened and it's not looked in this binary technology or no technology kind of way. You know?
No, I'll come back to it. I think it's what you're making is even important for the whole side of business things that we haven't had for the last couple of years. Like, as I already mentioned, that webinar now, I'm missing the whole event side of it. And I think so many people now, even that are maybe even graduating in the last year or two, won't have those networking skills going into the business or into industry, that they're able to rock along to an event on their own, get to know people, hopefully get work out of it or get a job or whatever it is. That whole side of it we're missing now. So nowadays, and I only talked to someone about this during the week, that they were asking about networking, and it's just, you have to kind of get out there, and you can't, it's not something you can learn certain skills again, but you kind of have to just get out and hope for the best and try it and see what works and what doesn't work, so it's one thing I do encourage many, many people to do if they're anyway involved in kind of a similar industry to what we're doing or a similar role. Get out and about and meet people, get along to these events that are happening, whether they're business or local business events or marketing related events or networking events, something like, you have the likes of your local enterprises, your district, your chambers, all these kind of things. They all have events that you can attend. The Marketing Institute have it as well. Get along and meet people, and that will come from, as I said, students now coming out of college will never have had that experience and might be fearful of walking into these rooms.
But they're fun, right? Because we've gone to. And again, I'm not a big fan. So there's a lot of networking events that are set up as networking events, and no one actually networks.
People at them as well.
It's the people going to show, I'm at this event, and those are completely useless. But there are little pockets that you'll always get in every city. It doesn't matter where you are, whereby people go and there's a genuine interest in the speaker, whatever the story is. But then it's not just going to see the speaker. You have a bit of a natter afterwards, whatever. You go for a couple of pints. It's there where you kind of meet people and you learn what their stories are, their kind of history and their career is, what their skill sets are. And that's where you build up your network ultimately, And that's something that was lost. And I think it's something that will be very, very valuable coming back. And I think it's the one thing that people constantly say, the online version of that world didn't work.
No,
it just did not work.
How can you network online? You have to put people into groups and all this kind of stuff. It just doesn't work.
And again, it's one thing that I did. I remember even with the students. So the students used to always, or one thing that a lot of people did was they put students into groups or pods or whatever, kind of where they go into little teams in the online. I never did that because if that was me, I'd be terrified and I just leave. So therefore, I was like, no. But I mean, it's the same thing with adults. We just don't like being pigeonholed into being forced to network. It's something that happens naturally. And again, if we're at those networking events, it's more, oh, Dave, have you met? He's involved in X, Y, and Z. It's not, right, we're going to put you into rigorous groups of 5 and you are going to be forced to talk to each other.
Icebreakers.
Throw a tennis ball at each other and we'll see who gets on with whoever.
Three facts you never thought you'd know about me or
tell
whatever.
Tell something interesting about yourself. It's like, I don't know. I have a dog called Lassie.
I think a lot of students coming out, and there'll be a few listening to this, obviously your students or people that I've taught along the way as well. Credible podcast and all that. But one thing I've noticed out with students as well is that they don't. Some of them now, obviously, not every student every year is going to do it, but especially in the field that we're in, they're not pushing themselves like they used to when they were back in full time, inside and full time. They're not getting out there as much, and they're fearful to put
Well, they
themselves out there
couldn't,
because they've
right?
never seen it, even online and stuff like that. So I find that a lot of those students that are going to come out now are going to find it very hard to kind of get a job for themselves if they haven't kind of pushed themselves out there anywhere. Where they're kind of going to be left behind almost for the last 2 years. So it's one of the things, that they need to start looking at right now and start.
It's a competitive. I think it's some of them are very, very good. Some of them won't. Some of them will be very, very book smart and get analyst jobs maybe, and they don't want to be putting themselves out there. And that's okay as well. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it goes back to what we said in last week's podcast, whereby going into the different kind of careers that you can go down within marketing.
Yeah.
For me, it all comes back to what are your own goals for yourself, and then your career allows you to achieve those goals rather than vice versa. So in the early stage of a career, do you want to travel? Well, marketing allows you to do that because you can get a job with a Jameson brand ambassador program or a
Shipped off
multinational
out
that
to
allows
somewhere.
you whatever. And you can move about the place. Or if you graduate from a decent university, you can just hop over to London and you're in the most international city in the world.
Not
in our
UCC,
case.
no?
Huh?
Not UCC, no?
The advice, which again, this is more of a do as I say.
I love the way
as
you went to
opposed
DCU opposed to UCC.
What?
You said DCU opposed to
Did I?
UCC.
So if you're, what I would say to people is that if you're in Cork, for example, you're in Dublin, doesn't matter what it is. One of the main things that you should do is get to one of the biggest cities in the world in the early stage of your career. And again, that is a do as I say as opposed to do what I do, because I've always lived in Cork ultimately. But if you go to a big city, and this is part of a talk that I give my students every year, kind of an hour and a half kind of a job, where I just go through different kind of attributes and things that you should actually look at when you're actually looking to kind of progress your career. If you are going to a city like a London, like a New York, whatever the case may be, you are working for the biggest companies, the best companies, the most aggressive companies, and you're working with the best people. If you're talking about sport, if you play with the best people, you will get better. No offense to Cork. Cork is brilliant. I love Cork. The best marketers in the world aren't in Cork. So therefore you should get it, but you should get abroad. And again, this is do as I say, not as what I do, because I didn't leave. And I try and go abroad for conferences, and I teach over in London a few times a year and all that kind of jazz. But ultimately, if you're in that marketing game and you're looking to progress, you should go abroad. And that'd be just a very, very basic piece of advice. I'm not saying you have to go abroad.
Just sometimes give you that competitive edge.
It gives you a bit of a competitive edge. It opens you up to different cultures, opens you up to different ways of thinking, doing things. There is a lot to be said. And as well as that too, I think what it does is it gives you a sense of scale. If you're in any Irish city, because it's Ireland, you find it very hard to understand the scale that a business can get to. You go to any tube station in London at rush hour and you understand scale.
Yeah.
This is 10 minutes at one portion of one day at one moment in time. And there are thousands of people here.
Get out of
That's
the way.
scale. That is scale.
Join it or get out of the way.
Exactly. Effectively, yeah. As you get people here, we'll put a bus shelter here and a bus shelter here. There's brands there that are taking over tube stations. Like, you know what I mean? So it just gives you a different sense of perspective that I don't think you do here. All the stuff you learn still applies, but it just gives you a sense of scale and how many people you need to hit to actually achieve the targets that you would want to achieve. That's what I say with startups. If anyone comes to me with a startup and say, don't start in Ireland.
Yeah.
Disaster. Get to a city, because Birmingham, if you launch a company in Birmingham, is bigger than the whole population of Ireland.
Yeah.
And it's a smaller region, obviously. So obviously, look, I'm coming at this predominantly from the academic lecture perspective. So I'm working with students. And even though I do a lot of hiring as well in a kind of a consultancy capacity, for yourself who is entirely in industry and kind of came into marketing, kind of left the field almost, what would your advice be to someone that just graduated, totally kind of not lost as such, but totally not knowing where they want to go down or what skills they need to hone into, whatever? what would you kind of say to people in terms of advice if they're about to, they're finished their exams, they're going to graduate in a few months, but what would your advice be?
I think going back to what you said a few minutes ago about kind of finding what area you want to go in, because there's nothing worse about someone coming to you and saying, oh, I want to go into marketing. What do you want to do? Marketing. Go back to what you said there about finding your niche and finding what you're good at. And someone that is a bit more analytical, numbers, will fall well into probably some form of digital advertising, SEO, whatever it is. They generally go that path. It's kind of one or the other. Someone that might be a bit more creative, a bit more I won't say artistic, but that kind of area will go down the route of maybe content creation, social media management, whatever it is. So I think first off, you have to kind of find where you sit in the whole industry. Now, there is some people then that, as you talked about, what was the word you used? Generalist, that will understand the different areas and will be able to hold themselves in the conversation, will be able to maybe do the basics, but know when, the important thing is know when they're out of their depth.
Yeah.
And the specialist need comes in,
Yeah.
and that's very, very important. And that's where people like myself or yourself will go into a business and be the generalist. And, I've gone into businesses where it's not just marketing I end up doing, I do more the managerial, the operation side of it, because that's a background that I have. So I think that's the first thing, is find out where your interests lie and your skills lie as well. Which generally can be two sort of things. You might want to do one area, but you're shite at it basically.
Yeah.
So find out what your interests are. But the second thing is, and we've talked about before, about you talked about there in terms of the reading side of it. You need to hone in on that area. You need to learn everything you can about that area, and everything you get taught in college is brilliant, but nothing is going to teach you like actually working, actually industry, actually work placements, work experience, whatever it is. And then actually going and researching more, learning more, videos, podcasts, whatever. There's loads of things. There's loads of resources out there nowadays. But one thing that I find a lot of people in the last couple of years coming to me and saying is, I want to go into marketing, but I have no experience. I can't get work. So it's like this whole thing of which comes first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. You can't get experience without having, you can't get work, without having experience, but you can't get experience without having the work. If that makes sense. So I always say, I don't like telling people to go and volunteer or go and do work for free, because I do think you should be paid for the work you do. But
it's a bit late for that when you're graduating, right? You should
yes,
be doing that
exactly.
later, earlier.
And that's one of the things I always say when you bring me in to do guest talks with or I do other guest talks in other colleges. I always do a little session at the end about kind of starting now. Because if you look in a room of maybe it's 30 people, maybe it's a room of 300 people, start now. And the reason being is you are technically, they're all friends, you're all in those little groups and pods and Microsoft Team breakouts for the last 2 years, but you are in competition at the end of the day with these people, and you are all fighting for a job. Now, thankfully, as we talked about last week, we're in an industry now where there is a few jobs going, but there's big competition for these jobs as well, because there's so many people coming out of college, because there's so many people entering marketing as an industry, I suppose. Like, it's probably on the increase in the last few years because it's become trendy and cool to kind of go into this area.
So that kind of fake it till you make it as well, though, I would say.
Oh, there's definitely some of that. Sorry.
Yeah, a lot of that goes on. Like, I mean, and the one point that I would pick up there more so than most would be, again, the reading bit. So, like, as I always say, if you're doing accountancy as a profession, you do your degree in accountancy or in commerce, and you do your accountancy specialization and blah, blah, blah. You then go on to do a 3-year apprenticeship and go on and do your ACA exams, whatever the case may be. So you're learning more on the job from the practical experience, right? There is an entitlement with some people, I'm not saying everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but some people that I've got my degree, that's it. That can't be how it works. Like, I mean, I'm a good bit older than the majority of my
students. A bit older.
My students and me. Not that old. But
not till next year.
But not till next year. Next year I'm old. But this year I'm fine. And next year I'll say I'm fine again. But
next year's denial.
Exactly. But the point here is that like when I was coming through, when I did my degree, there was no digital marketing. Digital marketing wasn't a thing. So therefore, I had all of
showing your age now.
I know, yeah. So I had all of the marketing skills because I was taught them, and I had a great education coming through the university that I'm teaching in now. But ultimately, I had to then go upskill in all of these areas. And now as a lecturer, I have to keep on upskilling.
Yeah.
There was nothing broke my heart more than when those iOS 14 changes came out last year, because it was like,
There's
that's those 100 lecture slides dead in the water anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Start from scratch.
There's all this stuff that you're in a constant you're a constant student, right? Learning different things, strategies, techniques, and I think that comes down to the best piece of advice that I would give someone. And again, when I say I'm giving the advice, I've ripped this from somewhere. So the last bit about being in competition in the city, I've robbed that from Scott Galloway. I'm going to rob this bit from someone else.
You're giving away all your secrets now.
Rob, as I'm academic, I cite everyone who I take the information from. But
Inspired by,
yeah. But the thing here is that if you're a constant student, that means that you're learning from something. One of the main things that you will always learn from is failing. There is no marketer, and because marketing isn't anymore just about doing a process-orientated job, there is a value that you need to add to an organization.
So I heard a very motivational, I can't remember who I saw it. I was actually only this week I saw it. Was a failure means that decisions were made. No.
Well, that's a bit too philosophical.
That was
for
a
me
bit deep now.
That's a bit too deep now for me. I don't like that no at all.
Yeah.
What was the point?
Well, yeah, go on, drive it on.
But
Quick.
Ultimately, the point here is that, like, if you're operating in an environment whereby you're in an SME, multinational, let's just say SME, you're given a budget, could be small, could be $5,000, let's just say, over the space of, say, 2 months. And you're looking to drive sales. Nowadays, we can measure where every cent of that went in terms of advertising, what platform, what content, blah, 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 and then what came back in terms of sales. If you have done that for the first time and you failed, you might be thinking the world is crashing down around you. I've just wasted $5,000. Every single one of us has ran a campaign or worked with a company or conceptualized something in terms of a brand or launched a product, and we've just gotten it wrong because it's entirely subjective, right? You are making a judgment based on the research and the data that is available, and you are applying that logic to some sort of a campaign or a launch or whatever that you're putting out into the marketplace. And sometimes it works brilliantly, and sometimes it doesn't. And I would always say to people that in the early stage of your career, fail as many times as you need to. Now, don't fail. Don't fail too often because you won't get hired anywhere. But in a results-based game, the only way that you learn is through either being very, very good and also learning from why that worked out very, very well. But more so, it's always about, okay, why didn't that work out as well as I wanted it to, or why did that completely tank? And then applying that to the next campaign so that will then work. If you do the same thing over and over again, that's just fucking stupid, right? Because it's always going to fail. So I think that lesson to me is very, very important in terms of just sheer resilience. You've been the same, been involved in companies whereby it's been an absolute disaster. But then X amount of years into my career, I can point at all these successes and I can point at all these failures and I can say, yeah, the successes outweigh the failures big time. Like, do you know what I mean? So that's what you need to kind of point to. Whereas if you're in the early stage of your career and you don't have that bank of wins, you can get very, very disenfranchised very, very early. And that's what I would always say to people. Resilience is really, really important. You will get success if you keep on at it. Now, there does become a point where you have to realize that probably maybe I'm not very good at this, but by and large, success is predominantly a ratio of resilience over failure, is what I would say. So then we always talk about this bullshit about what's the best piece of advice and all the rest, and we've just gone through a few bits and pieces there. Now we could go on for hours about this kind of stuff, but what's the worst piece of advice you've ever gotten in the early stages of your career, we'll say, that you learned from?
I was going to say start a podcast until you said early stages, but no.
For the record, I didn't recommend that.
No,
you were the one who came
advice.
up with this idea, this calamity.
My own advice.
Please come back on.
That's if you come back. That's if he comes back.
It's like the Titanic. Come back, on, come back.
He'll be watching in now when this goes out. He'll be like, "What are they after doing?" Worst piece of advice. I suppose you kind of already said that I didn't come into marketing through traditional means. So I suppose I didn't get much advice actually in early days of going into marketing. I kind of fell into it myself, but going from that then is where I would advise people to, and you can go down a rabbit hole in terms of like a mentor or someone to bounce ideas off. But I do think it is important to maybe not so much always find a mentor as in one person, but finding a group of people that you can bounce ideas off or go to get their ideas. They might be on the same level as you, they might be peers in college, but they're just a good group of people that think well, think similar to you, or maybe even think totally different to you, but are able to ground you in terms of what you're thinking. And just someone to be a group that you're able to, be confident enough that you will be able to speak well in terms of. So I suppose I've never really gotten too much advice, I suppose, in terms of marketing, but that's been my way of working for the last couple of years. Like if I need to bounce ideas off someone, I will go to someone, whether it's even you or whether it's someone else, just to bounce ideas off, I suppose.
Even me.
Yeah, no, I said I had to throw it in.
Yeah, even
just
me.
to keep you happy. Like otherwise you'd be giving out about me.
That doesn't keep me happy. Even him. No, I would actually agree. So, like, I mean,
like, what's your thoughts on having a
my
mentor?
big thing? I'm big on mentorship.
Yeah.
I had several mentors, I would say. Because I often wear two hats in industry and academia, I often had multiple.
That makes sense. But
both.
when you said to me several mentors, a lot of people would think they have several mentors, but they don't. They just have people to talk to. Whereas that makes sense that you have.
I would classify them as mentors, like colleagues as well, but mentors after a time, I would say. Like no one starts off as a mentor.
No.
But they're a colleague or they're a boss starting off. And then over time that graduates into something not more meaningful, but just something more, shall we say. So therefore, but I would say that mentorship thing is important because unlike a network, so a network you can bounce ideas off of and they can be very, very supportive. I think what a mentor should be able to do is call out your bullshit as well. When you're doing something wrong or when you're not getting something or when maybe you're being a bit too stubborn or a bit too arrogant or a bit too cocky or you're not really understanding the political environment that you're in or whatever. There's loads of different situations you could be in. A mentor is someone that probably drags you back by the scruff of your collar and says, cop on a small bit. Do you know what I mean? And I think that to me was very, very important, I think, particularly when I was kind of had the two hats on. And still have the two hats on, and still I'm not fucking 50. Like, I'm trying to grow in either of those areas.
Next year.
No, I'm not fucking 50. Just to be clear to all the listeners, I am not fucking 50. And there's nothing wrong with being 50, but I'm not fucking 50.
You just alienated half our audience there,
yeah. But look, ultimately, I would be big on the mentorship thing, big time. And again, I think some mentors stay there for a short period of time and they kind of not serve purpose, because that sounds very, very transactionary, but others then stay for a longer period of time and so on and so forth, and those relationships transition. But I always think you need someone there to kind of hold you accountable.
But going back to the student thing, a mentor, I feel nowadays has the idea of a mentor. I love the idea of a mentor, but I think the idea of a mentor has been lost among the social kind of audience that are coming out nowadays because they're watching.
Well, Gary Vaynerchuk ain't your mentor if you're fucking talking about that. Like, do you know what I mean?
That's what I was going to mention. Like, that's the problem, is a lot of people are looking up to this kind of attitude and this kind of culture and this kind of behavior and thinking, that's my mentor, that's my guy to follow.
That's not a mentor. That's having a God complex.
Yes.
And there's an entirely different thing to that. Your mentor, everyone is fucking, we're all individuals. Hey. But
we all have a personality.
Exactly. But ultimately, I was watching Derry Girls the other day and they were saying, we're all being individual this year, but I don't want to be individual by myself. But ultimately the thing with that is that it's very, very unique to you, because certain people have certain traits, qualities, skills, attributes. You want to achieve certain things. You've certain different balances in terms of monetary versus relationships, friends versus your work. All these different things filter into it, right? In terms of what you want, in terms of your 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, your whole year. How do you want that to be made up? What do you want to achieve? That is very, very unique to you. And that is why I would always say that your mentor should understand what your goals and ambitions are. And again, if it is just focused on work, that's no good, because your work is never going to be a determinant entirely in terms of how you want your work-life balance to be, shall we say. But they're both intrinsically linked now. Some people are happy to work, again, like we said, I think we said it last week, they're happy to work for 80 grand a year when they're 21 and they're working for your Lidl or your Aldi, whatever the case may be, and they're happy to work themselves into the ground. And fair play to them, but they're predominantly motivated by monetary worth. There are other people there who are happy to eat beans on toast for 5 years because they want to set up their own business, but they are going to strive towards something that they are absolutely passionate about, but they are also highly risk intensive. And they're fine with that because they're pursuing something that they love, they enjoy, and so on and so forth. And then you've got other people who want a balance of, I want my 9 to 5 to go on 2 holidays a year, but I want to spend my weekends with my friend. It depends on what it is, right? Like, I've got one of the best examples that I have is that I've got a mate and he loves climbing mountains. Loves climbing mountains.
Big ones or
he
small
could
ones?
earn he could earn, not metaphorical by the way, I mean big, I mean proper big fucking mountains.
Right, okay.
And the point is that if he wanted to earn more money, he could, but he just loves fucking climbing mountains. That means that he needs to go out every evening and fucking exercise,
So
and
he can climb
therefore
mountains.
so he can climb mountains. So therefore he can't be in work fucking 8 in the morning to late in the evening. He just can't do it. So again, it's down to your own goals, ambitions, and then using your career in marketing, whatever that may be, to actually allow you to achieve those goals and ambitions. And I think that to me is the key thing here in terms of how you craft your career in the early day. And again, when we're younger, we all look at the scoreboard. How much are you earning? How much am I earning? Am I earning more than him? If I'm earning more than him, then fuck it, I'm doing better than him. I'm smarter than him. And that's Mickey waving at its best, right? In lad context anyway. But ultimately, again, that doesn't matter. If you're mature enough, you're going to look at what you want in terms of your overall life. How do I achieve that in the short term for right now? And how do I do that over my overall career? Which again is a difficult thing to do because you start work at 20, you don't retire until you're 78 or whatever year.
By the time we retire, it'll be fucking 95.
95, yeah. If I make it to 95, I've had a great time.
So anyone that
Ultimately, that's it.
couldn't be bothered listening now to the whole show, we round it up in a couple of bits of advice now that we've gone through. So get out and network.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with good people, basically.
Good people are important.
Start now. You know, especially if you're a graduate, you're probably slightly on the too late side, but start now the minute you're listening if you're starting off your career. And
don't start a podcast.
Don't start a podcast is a big one. And find out what you're interested in terms of career, monetary value.
Not interested in, what is your ambition? Not what you're interested in.
People are will you?
People are
destroying the
interested.
mics.
What?
Stop
I
banging.
don't mind that. Not what you're interested in. You're interested. You're interested in food, sport, music, football,
grand,
pornography.
whatever.
You're interested in lots of different things. The point is that you may not be able to make money off
Follow
of those
your
things.
dreams. Yeah.
What is don't follow your fucking dreams. That's the worst advice you can give someone, for God's sake.
I never got that. That's the problem.
Pocahontas over here in the corner. But anyway, the point here is, what is your goal in terms of your work-life balance, self, whatever, and fit your career into that, as opposed to just looking at your career in a kind of a binary, singular kind of way. I think that would be the best thing. And again, we said earlier on, kind of mentorship, I think, is very, very important there to get you through that.
Dave is open for anyone that wants.
Fuck off. Sorry, don't fuck. Sorry. I can't say that. My students are fine. Anyone else listening in, I'm not open for inquiries.
I'll send you me hourly.
You can go to the university that I teach, and then I can be your mentor. You're fine. But I think that's key here. And the other thing that I would say as well is that don't get pissed off too early in your career if your things aren't going your way. Because people get really pissed off in their career early doors. I did a PhD and was living like a peasant for 4 years and was tearing up. I had dreadlocks when I started my PhD, and now I'm schlaphead. So things go badly early on. Keep on going. You'll be grand.
Good stuff. Well, we got through it without a producer.
Without a producer, I know. Now, we'll see what the edit's like. Watch out. My mic wasn't turned on.
Some disaster.
Again.
So hopefully that someone's listening to us somewhere, but hopefully we'll have Owen back next week. And
No, we will have Owen back. I'm dragging here.
We'll light a candle.
We'll light a candle in the church.
Thanks everyone for listening. Subscribe on social, follow us, subscribe on YouTube, all that kind of stuff, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks very much, guys.